There it is. Okay, we'll move along here. For the good of the cause, Karen, do you have
I have not
anything?
received any emails.
I'm sorry?
I have not received any emails.
Okay.
Thank
I will
you.
mention one thing that I received, and it was anonymous. So I know for the good of the cause, there needs to be a name and recording, but I think the message is pretty good. So it's in reference to the new dress code that we will be reviewing. And it said, would the board consider allowing teachers to make the decision on whether hats or hoods are worn in their classroom? It could be added, the pledge, national anthem, presentations in classrooms, teacher discretion, not unlike the cell phone policy. So that's just a piece of paper that I received, just so so everybody knows it was made out to the board. So I thought I'd let you in on that. Presentations, community schools. Tim?
Thank you, Rick. So if the board looks in their executive content, they will find the visuals for this. I'm sorry that I don't have them viewable to share on the big screen, but I can certainly walk you through this. So, over the past really 3 months since, Colleen encouraged us to take a look at the community school model that Saranac Lake has implemented over the past few years, and then Erica Bizzaio and Diane Fox have come to present. Oh, that's great, Karen. Thank you. Mm-hmm. If you just hit slideshow and from beginning. All right, that's awesome. Do you mind if can I direct it this way?
Yeah.
All right. So since that time, we've had some interesting meetings to try and talk about what is a community school, what the potential needs and benefits of creating a community school are, and how that would take place in terms of the Lake Placid and Wilmington communities. So just as a recap, a community school is really a place, but it's also about a set of partnerships between schools and the resources that exist within the communities. And when we think about the difference between a traditional school and a community school, a lot of it has to do with the level of intention and organization that comes into play when the school is interacting with different agencies and different community entities. I like this quote because I think it sums up, in my experience, what often takes place in traditional schools. And it's that traditional schools tend to have a variety of ad hoc community partners working with their students, families, and teachers with little coordination. In contrast, the infrastructure of community schools allow these partnerships to be intentional, aligned, and focused on results, maximizing their effectiveness. So, within the community of Lake Placid, certainly there is a need to support students beyond the school day. When we look at the eligibility of students and families for free and reduced lunch, teetering around 43%, that gives us a sense of the socioeconomic considerations that we as a district need to make for the betterment of our students outside of the school day. And then you compound that situation with the fact that there are various social enrichment opportunities that are available for students within the greater North Alba, Wilmington area, but those tend to be centered around sporting and ecotourism, that really the income of a family is the determinative factor about participation. But we want to have a robust experience for our students, and we are not alone in this effort. There are agencies across the region that have devoted years of service towards that end. So the question is, would becoming a community school make those efforts aligned and more intentional, and ultimately leverage the resources for students in a more profound way? So when we think about how this could work, there's a sense about partnership, and then there's a sense about the day-to-day affairs within the school. So in terms of the role that the school could play in the formation of a community school, one would be to, of course, appoint someone to a 12-month position to act as the director of this initiative. And that individual would convene monthly meetings with the different networks of supports that are within the community, generate different calendars and resources for local families, identify barriers that are in place to the utilization of those resources, and ultimately try and act as the point of care in the school community to families as needs persist. When we think about the role of a community partner, the first would be to have a representative to attend meetings on a routine basis with other agencies, with the community school director, to share information on those events and to try and partner to find ways to bring additional funding to support the local students and families, and to share available resources and to share information so that we can try and create a comprehensive experience for our students and local families on a month-by-month basis. So then it really just comes to how this can be structured. And there are many different ways that it could be, but one of the ways that certainly I've been gravitating towards in my discussions with different agencies is really just recognizing that different groups can fulfill a different need or benefit for the students and the school just by the nature of what they do in their association. So I kind of termed this as networks. Really, I've broken it down into 3 potential networks that, were we to form a community school, we could interact with for varying purposes. So the first would be what I'm calling a coordination network. And that would be the purpose would be to partner and align school and community events, experiences, and opportunities for students and families. There are many municipalities and agencies and organizations that the school interacts with on a regular basis, and meeting on a routine basis with a common goal under a single umbrella of community schools ultimately would allow us to partner in a way that's more intentional and more aligned, and will ideally create a more robust and positive experience for students and families. The second network really speaks to those agencies that try to address the specific needs of students and families as they manifest. And so I'm calling this the support network. And the intention of that network would be to enhance enrichment opportunities, but also to improve access to resources for students and families. And so this network has been in existence for some time. Many of the names that are already potential partners with regards to this network are names that we as a school district know well. The Shipman Youth Center, the Community Youth Connections, the Lake Placid Educational Opportunity Fund, the Outing Club, Rotary, the Adirondack Foundation, the After School Program, the Youth Athletics Association. So just so many of these organizations that have a particular focus in relation to the school, yet together under a routine structure could fit more as a piece of the puzzle that ultimately can provide a comprehensive support to students. And then, of course, the last really just has to do with those school-based resources. When we think about the difference between a community school and a traditional school, one of the key pieces is that a community school has resources embedded within the school system so that the school can be fleet-footed. It can act quickly when the needs manifest and they are not predictable. Many of the organizations that are in place presently to support the needs of students are often application-based organizations where you have to be aware of the needs that a student or family may have well in advance, and then participate in an application process that is taking a bit of time and is not as responsive as the day-to-day embedded supports that a school-based network would have. So this final network would really include having tech support available for families, continuation with the backpack program, leveraging the mental health team that we have in place, along with the prevention team, and then also having this coordinated through the community school director. So these three networks would interface somewhat seamlessly with each other through the work of the community school director. And just as anecdotally, the coordination network, the first network that I spoke of, they would be instrumental in identifying opportunities for students. The support network would be instrumental in distributing and identifying resources to make sure those students can enjoy the opportunities that were identified. And then the school-based resource network would be in place to make sure that the right people who need these supports get them in a timely fashion. So, but before I continue, any thoughts or questions with regards to that structure? Okay, so then it goes to what would be some priority areas for us. And in order to identify priority areas, of course, this will be an ongoing discussion. But when we think about the impediments to the full utilization of enrichment opportunities and resources for families, oftentimes those impediments are the day-to-day things that people can't change due to the nature of their employment, of their living situation, of their background. And the goal would be to try to have the school act in a more supportive way so that students can have increased enrichment and resource opportunities. So thinking about those priority areas, really it's first and foremost an acknowledgement that we can't create a robust for our students outside of the school day if we don't have access to it. And so we need to open up our facilities to a greater degree and provide unique opportunities for those families and students on weeknights and on evenings and on the weekends. So this could be something as as necessary as coordinating swim lessons. I know we had talked about that when this first came over, in partnership through the hospital. It could be having open gym where we have our PE teacher here at night teaching young students how to ride a bicycle. It could be just having a safe place for kids to come on the weekend when it's negative 20 degrees out to shoot hoops and have somebody there to staff our facilities. So it's just creating a vibe and a sentiment in our schools that the doors truly are open and we want our kids here. And then if you build it, they will come. Once the students are here, then the question is, how can we leverage the networks that we have in place to create a more robust experience for the kids? And that's where you can start bringing in performers from the Lake Placid Center for the Arts when they have people coming into town, providing unique enrichment. When there are athletes coming in with diverse skill sets, putting them in the space of our students, or having our students go to these different venues to have these experiences embedded into their education. And part of that, of course, is you can't remove the barriers to a specific event or opportunity unless you know that the opportunity is actually existing. And so in order to do that, you do have to have some degree of regional event planning and coordination so that we can prepare to make sure our students and families can participate. So coordinating those things would be an intricate part of a community school initiative. Another really, I think, critical piece that I think has a lot of relevance both for the community but for the school when we think about a partnership is the actual product that we are working towards, which is ensuring that our students leave here with the skills and the desire to enter into a career that is beneficial to our region, to the greater society. And the only way that students are going to have those senses of what they want is through trial and error. And so designing some workforce learning partnerships with some of our local agencies, creating apprenticeships, those are possible windows that we could look at here as we build that network on a routine basis, and we start utilizing it in a way to say, you have these events coming, well, what does the preparation for that event look like? And we have some students who attend our CTE programs at the Adirondack Education Center who are doing building trades or heavy equipment. And it sounds like the preparation for those involves similar skill sets. Can we deploy our students to get some on-the-job learning, but also help in the critical areas that are needed to support the events and businesses that are in our community. And then the last piece really is just about a recognition that there are a tremendous amount of benefactors in our community. We're very blessed in that regard, but just being a point of reference for those agencies so that the school really can speak to who is in most need of particular resources, what the growing edges are in our educational footprint for our students, and how can we work with those agencies to partner to make sure those resources are deployed in a way that's impactful for families. But then also, how can we work together to even go after larger sources of funding that would potentially have a greater impact on our entire community. And really the big one with regards to this is what's called the Full Service Community Schools Grant, which is a federally funded program that is given out to about a dozen schools annually, and it is a matching grant. So if we were able to start to create a fund to support these programs and then put forth a community-based application to the federal government for this, it could really sustain this program in a pretty profound and meaningful way. So those are some of the priority areas that we could be looking at just initially, just thinking about some of the needs that are paramount in the community today. And then just trying to break down potential goals. And this would really just be dependent on the actual timeline of implementation. So if the school was able to begin this process of implementing for this coming year, then we could start looking at the formation of these networks, meeting with an appointed community school director, and then generating those supports and the structures in place where families know what the resources are, know how to avail themselves to them, and build that infrastructure so that these three networks can work together. And the goals really can change from year to year. So that is sort of an initial discussion point about what community schools could be. And certainly in the last 3 weeks, a lot of the grant cycles with regards to LEAF and the Adirondack Foundation have come to pass, and Dana and I were able to work together to submit some proposals to those organizations to support this effort, to see if we can get that going as quickly as possible, if the board is amenable to that level of implementation. But ultimately, it's just starting to have discussions about what the vision is that we would like to put forth for our students, and then taking the necessary time to dot our I's and get us in a place where we can do that effectively.
So Tim, I have a question. Is it your kind of wish or your hope that this position is essentially funded through a variety of grants versus any type of a direct expenditure to the district? Is it, are you expecting this to be funded grant mostly?
I think we're gonna know more about that when the grants are announced in April and potentially dispersed in May. That's the initial hope that I've certainly had in my conversations with the board to date, is that if we can secure some support within the region to get this off the ground as seed funding, then that would be the optimal way to do so. But there are also opportunities that the administrative team and I have been talking regularly about to look at ways to act in a more efficient way within the district, where we may look at not necessarily adding a position, but simply shifting a resource from an area where the need may not be as paramount as it was due to the enrollment that's depreciated over time, and instead having that individual work more towards this area with no real impact to the budget, really just a shift in terms of the job duties of a particular person.
Because I know Tim, and I'm just using Saranac Lake for an example, just because I have just from my interacting, with the liaison in Saranac Lake, that they really didn't rely on grants in Saranac Lake. They actually kind of relocated a teacher, from a position in the primary level, and she went into the position as the liaison, but subsequently it did increase class sizes in the lower levels as a result of shifting someone around. And personally, I just feel, at least it's always been kind of the last 4 years since I've been on the board, that it's not something that at least our district has ever really sought after, was increasing class sizes. And I just want to make sure that, again, you've said earlier, I was the one that brought this to the district. And I still think it's a great program, but I don't want to do anything to disrupt, other classes, causing, classroom sizes to increase, or also to kind of overtax the taxpayers. I think if there's grant money available that can fund this, so be it. I do like in here that you have included that the director would be reappointed annually so that the board could reassess this on an annual basis. But again, I brought this in because I thought it was a great idea, but I just don't want to be in a situation where we're kind of on an annual basis borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, so to say. And, in the past, we've had this expression that, you can get really close to the fiscal cliff. And I don't know. I think this is going to be a great thing for our district, but I think we also have to really fine tune where the money's coming from, where the salary is going to be set, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Colleen. I agree. Certainly, our paramount goal is maintaining quality instructional programming for the students. And when we look at potentially implementing something like this, the most important part is going to be to ensure that in our efforts to try and improve specific aspects of our students' lives, that we're not taking away resources that ultimately are going to impact them academically. So I feel like that is certainly a barometer for this process, that to some degree, as we look at the timeline that grants and awards will be announced, that to some degree can really kind of indicate to us a potential timeline of implementation for this work, just based on the results of those grants.
Any other questions, comments? Tim, thank you very much. That brings some clarity to this project, for me anyhow. So,
Sure.
Anybody else have anything?
No, thanks, Tim. Thank you.
If not, you're all warmed up. Go right into your standards alignment presentation.
All right, I appreciate that. And I know when you get into standards, teachers either get very excited or very concerned. So I'm going to try to share my screen here so that I can have it be a little more intuitive. I think I have it loaded up here, Karen, so just one moment. Trying to downsize this. The window I need is hiding in there. Let's see if I can do this. Thanks for your patience. I apologize for all the tech issues this evening. There we go. All right, is everyone able to see that all right? I might be able to make it full screen too. All right, so you may recall from our last meeting, I broached the subject of the next generation learning standards. And I shared with the board a document that lays out over the next several years a shift from the Common Core standards to the next generation learning standards in a variety of content areas and grade levels across New York State. Really with the first ones on the forefront happening as early as next year in ELA and math, with science, Student on the Heels, and a variety of other programs. So a process to prepare our students and our staff for this shift in standards is critical, and that is the intention of this discussion today. So first, I'd just like to take a moment and talk about what standards alignment is. And I suppose that any definition could be derived, but when I'm thinking about in terms of what we're going to need to do as a district to prepare our students to meet these standards, the first is we need to have a process in place to adopt the standards and integrate them into each classroom. And the second is, when we think about standards alignment, we also need to have a process to review the student data and instructional data we have to determine whether or not the standards that we are teaching in our classes and prioritizing are the most important standards that need to be there. And a good way to think about this is just that, quite frankly, there are too many standards in all of the content area to adequately hit them all in the time frame that we are allotted in the school calendar. And because of that, each district and each teacher has to make some opportunity cost decisions. Those are to identify what are considered to be the priority standards and what are considered to be supporting standards. So just to illustrate what this looks like, you really need to have an understanding of what the difference is between a standard and curriculum. So learning standards are the knowledge, skills, and understanding that students can demonstrate over time because of instruction and learning experiences. So as an example, this is a specific learning standard in the next generation learning standards from the grade 7 ELA standards. And it says students will be able to cite specific textual evidence to support analysis of primary or secondary resources. So that's the skill that they've learned over time through their interaction with the curriculum that's been developed by the different teachers. Curriculum, on the other side, speaks to bringing the actual standards to life. It's the curriculum that weaves the learning standards into a story, and that builds the capacity of a learner to access and apply what they've learned. So the example of that from the US, from the world history curriculum says that students will examine reasons for the fall of the Roman Empire and the development of feudalism.
Got it.
So if we just look at the interaction between learning standards and curriculum here, in the learning standard as an example, the skill that we want to have students to be able to use is to look at a piece of text, a primary document, secondary source, and then actually call out specific passages in the document to be able to make a case about an argument. When we look at what the curriculum is saying, they're saying, well, you can showcase how to understand that standard by looking at specific examples such as the fall of the Roman Empire versus the feudalism in Western Europe. So the interaction of curriculum and standards is important, but when we think about standards, it's kind of like having the skills to go out and use a hammer on a routine basis, and the curriculum is like your dad telling you to go build the garage. That's kind of the interaction between standards and curriculum. So what do our educators need to know as we progress towards the implementation of the standards? Well, first, educators need to be aware of what grade level and course standards have been added or removed, what grade level or course standards have shifted from, say, 5th grade to 6th grade or 7th to 8th, or in some cases, 3rd to 2nd, and what clarifications, limitations to the standards have been established, what changes in the language of the standards will affect instructional decisions, and how will changes in the standards influence student understanding and how performance is measured. So if we're not having a process to look at the standards on a routine basis, then we may not even be aware that a 4th grade teacher is teaching something that is now expected to be taught at a different grade level, thanks to the shift in standards. And that's why this conversation is really critical, and it's timely from state ed's perspective that we would be doing this work. Okay, so we've talked a little about what standards are in curriculum. Now I want to talk about what's considered the most impactful practice of any quality instructional institution. And that practice is called collective teacher efficacy. And basically that means that the best schools, the best districts and institutions they, within their halls, have a collective belief amongst the school faculty that they have the ability to positively affect students. In other words, they know their impact and it's embedded in everything that they do. Where do we get this clever term collective teacher efficacy from? It's from a guru of sorts in the educational field. His name is John Hattie. John Hattie basically compiled research from hundreds of thousands of studies on educational institutions. And in his work, what he tried to do was look at all those strategies and look at the research around them and decide what are the things that move students forcefully ahead in the content and their understanding, and what are the things that drag students behind. And he didn't just look at what a teacher can do in the classroom. He looked at every sort of factor, socioeconomic factors, home environment, the amount of resources available to students. But he also did look at classroom impacts. And of all the thousands of studies that he indicated, what he found is that there's an average effect size for all of these different studies. And he labeled this as the hinge point of education. And the hinge point is anything that reduces a change above 0.4, based on all these studies that were done, is considered to be moving students ahead, potentially faster than on grade level on an annual basis. Anything that's below the point of 0.4 is considered to be something that slows down students' progress and has them start to drag behind in grade levels. So if you look at the yellow Post-it note there, the top 3 factors that John Hattie put forth to most directly influence student achievement, the first one is collective student efficacy, or teacher efficacy. And you can see in parentheses, it says 1.57. And what that means is that if on an annual basis, for a student to stay on track, we're using strategies that are roughly at 0.4 in effectiveness, all of these different strategies being labeled. If something is done diligently and it has an impact effect of 1.57, that's basically saying that that has the capability to advance students 4 grade levels just by doing this one thing. But it has to be done with fidelity. The next 2 things that were mentioned in Mr. Hattie's reports are self-reported grades, where students are actually able to identify with their teacher what the standard is and show how they've actually met the standard. So that's a level of self-awareness and understanding that is critical in the educational process. And then the last one is teacher estimates of achievement. And teacher estimates of achievement means that we are aware of what a student is capable of, and we are providing targeted goals for them so they have an aspirational educational experience. And all of these 3 things are intricately related to standards alignment. And the primary reason why is teacher estimates of achievement. If our staff are not aware of the standards that are being changed, they can't adequately assess whether or not the students are understanding the standards and meeting those standards. And thus they cannot accurately estimate what a student is capable of and then create goals above that point. When we think about self-reported grades, a student can't self-report on meeting a standard unless they know what the standard is and how to meet it. And lastly, collective teacher efficacy. We all, as educators, believe in our hearts that we are making a positive impact in the lives of students. But we have been in a data desert for the past 3 years. There has been very little accountability, and what little accountability that's been had through the regents, well, not the regents, that's a poor example, but the 3 through 8 testing that did happen last year has been polluted by the myriad factors that have come along with COVID. We just don't have a quality pulse on what our students know in terms of standards. And so for all these reasons, this conversation is timely, and we really need to think whatever practice we put in place to prepare our staff and have them having the standards implemented, we need to make sure that we're doing it collectively in a way where all the staff work together to feel that they're making a difference and they're aware of the targeted goals that we have to have for our students. So how do we build collective teacher efficacy? Well, the first thing that we need to do is support a district-wide priority. In this case, the state has made it very easy for us because they've mandated that we push towards the next generation learning standard. So we know we have to do this work. The next is we have to create a framework for this collaboration to occur. And that's what we'll be talking about in the next slide. And then, of course, you have to provide time and training for that level of collaboration to happen. So in terms of a plan that we should be focusing on starting next year, we need to implement the standards, and then we need to have a vehicle for this work to take place within the school day of the staff. And it's a collective process. It can't be done alone. So because of that, we need to redefine the organization and focus of our departments and of our department leaders to meet this specific district-wide priority. And we need to empower our department leaders to work with their teams on a routine basis to make sure that the standards they're all working with are aligned and are being met in measurable ways. So there's a lot of information there before I actually talk about logistics. A lot of that was philosophy. But to get to this point, I think it is important to go there. So before I continue, are there any questions or thoughts or points of clarity you'd like me to speak to?
What's the overall teacher sentiment with the new standards coming online? Is there excitement or dread or maybe a mixture of both?
I can't speak for the staff, of course, in their entirety, but we do have the future planning process taking place over the next 3 weeks, and departments have prepared the documents, and some of the questions we've geared specifically towards standards and their level of understanding of the standards and their sense of preparation. And in almost every department, there seems to be a hunger for a structure to be in place for this work to happen, so that we are ahead of the curve here before accountability measures the success of our institution based on standards that we need to be aligned to. So to answer your question, I think it's vast. You're talking about incorporating an entire new set of standards in all the content areas over a 5-year period. So if we don't break it down into measurable steps, it will be overwhelming for anybody. And that's why, because it is so overwhelming, doing this work with your colleagues who you share similar content with and work with different grade levels with, that level of commonality is going to be critical to kind of Sherpa people through what's going to be a challenging process, because there isn't an answer. There are too many standards. We have to decide which ones to pare down, and that requires conversation and discussion of values and importance that need to happen on a departmental level. So I think if we can create the structure, I think there will be a level of excitement and engagement amongst the staff to talk about what we're doing with purpose and what our goals are and what are the skills we want our students to have and how are we measuring that? And do the students know that that's the expectation for them? How will they know when they're successful? Those types of questions are going to get people excited. But if we just say, go prioritize your standards, then I'm going to call in the next day after doing that, because that will be concerning. So having this framework in place to show everyone that this can be done methodically is critical to answer your question. Did I answer your question, Dan? Yeah. So how do we foster a developmental focus? Well, the first thing that we would need to do is to group our faculty into departments to review, discuss, and actually work towards prioritizing our standards across grade levels. So just literally grouping our staff together based on the content they teach or the grade levels that they cover. The second is to really refine the role of our departmental leaders, and then provide training and expectations and incentives for applicants to do this added work. This is going to be great work for our district, but it is going to be additional work. And we want to make sure that our department leaders are excited and trained to do that work and are prepared to lead their colleagues in this initiative. And then, of course, the most important thing, where if I ever want to try and suggest something that would, I think, be of benefit to staff, to our students, the first question is always, what is the time to make sure that this can happen effectively? And it's actually better to do nothing than it is to roll something out and not have the appropriate time to support it. because it will result in initiative fatigue and burnout, and we don't want that for our staff. This is too important. So those are the ways that we could foster a departmental focus. So when we think about the roles of our department leaders, this is where we start to get the actual structure, a plan that we can implement starting this summer, moving into next year, just so that we can progress towards alignment in the way that the state would like us to. So the first is to make sure that our department leaders are appointed with these specific responsibilities, and that over the summer they would receive training. So I've been in contact with several different companies, but one I think that's very promising, that's on the forefront of alignment, is a company called First Educational Resources, and they teach department leaders, they teach staff how to look at the standards and decide what is a priority standard versus what is a supportive standard. And they go through the process in a way where it's an iterative process. Each year when you reflect on the data of your students, you're able to go back and say, you know, we really thought that was the priority standard, but when I look at the ELA data here, you know, the vocabulary is just not strong in, you know, grades 8 through 10. And so we really need to shift our focus from comprehension of text to vocabulary. And then suddenly it becomes a focus in ELA 8 through 10 and other content areas that we need to have these specific factors in place in classrooms to make vocabulary retention stronger and more robust. So it's really just building that process. We need to make sure our department leaders have the training and the time to facilitate their department meetings, to lead these standard alignment efforts with the right training in working with the administrative team, and to provide support for new teachers, and to visit classrooms throughout the department to make sure that the standards are being rolled out in a consistent manner across the content levels. So what sort of structure are we talking about? Well, if we look at the areas of commonality and the logistical considerations that are within our district, mainly that we have 2 campuses, a K through 5 facility and a 6 through 12 facility, and the content area shifts in various places, really it makes sense to have about 14 different departments that are put together with around an average department size of 6 members per department. Some of these are really formulaic and easy to see why they would be formed the way they are. As a former social studies teacher, it makes sense to have the 6 through 12 social studies teachers all together in a single department. They would meet routinely and talk about the standards and the curriculum and the practices in the classroom. The same is true for the other ones that are mostly based in the content areas, the cores of science, math, ELA, and special education. And then alternatively, in the elementary school, we do departmentalize starting in 4th grade with math and ELA, and then we have science and social covered together. And so we would want to have a K through 5 department for social studies and science, math, ELA, special education. And then we have the specials classes and the other service providers that are somewhat unique in a district and need to be paired together so the dialogue can occur. And that's where you actually have to blend our 2 facilities together. So we're talking about our mental health team, our art and music teachers, our PE and health teachers, our foreign language, and our library and technology teachers. If we were to do this only on a building specific level, then there wouldn't be enough dialogue to occur amongst people because we split those departments up between 2 buildings. So that would be the model of trying to divide the staff meaningfully in that way. But one of the most important considerations is those last departments, you have to find a common time for that work to take place. And you have people in 2 different facilities that are going to have to find a common time. Presently, our schedule is not aligned. We have an earlier start time for the middle high school, and we have a later start time for the elementary school. So if we know we need time to have this work take place, we know we need to have departments that bridge both buildings so the standards can be aligned, then it does beg the question about, is a unified start time something that can be done And based on all the factors that would go with that, is it something that should be done? So when we think about next steps, the first thing we need to do is create a common time for departments to meet weekly. This would be effective next year. So it could be something as simple as earmarking 45 minutes every Monday of each week for department leaders to meet. And having them work through the different processes that the training is provided for over the summer to start aligning the standards. The next step would be to post, interview, and appoint department leaders to begin working over the summer to receive the training so that they can lead their departments in this initiative. And then the actual third step, of course, would be to train the department leaders and the administrative team in this work in July and August. But that first one is a significant one. It would be a change for our district, and one that is certainly worthy of additional discussion. So beyond departmental focus, are there other benefits of a unified start time that we've been able to look at to date? So some of those benefits that we've identified as an administrative team and within our departments. The first is somewhat obvious, but middle high school students, the American Association of Pediatrics really recommends that for optimal learning and retention, students start their day at 8:30 or later. So already, the body of research in terms of adolescent learning really does support a later start time. But then there's other logistical pieces that maybe haven't come to the fore until now that do need to be considered. So presently, because our middle high school starts earlier than our elementary school, we also happen to start earlier than some of the other districts within the region. And because of that, our students arrive to the Adirondack Educational Center for CTE programs before other districts, and then they leave at the end of the day before those districts too. When you add up the time where their students are not, their peers from other districts are not there in the morning, and when they leave while their peers stay, there's almost 45 minutes of instructional time lost daily for our trade students at the Adirondack Educational Center. And as a teacher, I think back to sometimes we would have an hour delay or a 2-hour delay. In my first period class, I'd always say, why is my first period class, always getting hit with this delay? I'm 2 days behind in content than all my other sections. And we would always make accommodation for that in districts so that it would shift because we didn't want a particular group of students to lose a day or two compared to their classmates. Here we're talking about on a daily basis, 45 minutes of lost instruction for a subset of students that are in the building trades. So that's certainly something to consider. Let's talk about the first pickup time in Wilmington. It's 6:20 a.m. for a student. So that's pretty early. If there was a shift in schedule to unify with the elementary school, then that would result in the first pickup in Wilmington, our first pickup of the day, being around 6:50 a.m. This would, in addition, a unified start time would create common times between buildings for departments to meet. It would provide consistency for staff shared between buildings. So we do have staff that are service providers in both facilities, and juggling a delayed start time in one facility with another is challenging. Having that consistent would be advantageous. Certainly in the light of the recent snow day that was called, that was a fairly easy one to make when there's a 2,000-mile swath of an 18-inch prediction range, but that's not always the case. And when you have an early start to the day, you're really losing time that snow removal and road preparation can happen. And so extending the period of the starting of the day at the middle high school to reflect that of the elementary would provide additional snow removal and road preparation time. But then we think about the actual logistics, which Dana will speak to after I get through this slide. And our enrollment has dropped over time since the days when the staggered schedule, I think made sense. And now we're in a place where if we were to combine the start time, we would be able to eliminate 3 runs in the morning of busing, 2 of which could be shifted to the afternoon, where we do have a greater need for sports, for different clubs, for different enrichment opportunities. And the last run could just be absorbed through attrition as we see an impending retirement in the transportation garage. So that would certainly be a benefit to the taxpayers as well. And then, you know, if we were to do this and we were to have a unified start time where we would pick up our students geographically together, the average number of students per bus based on our current numbers would be in the low 30s. And our buses have a 66 passenger capacity. So we'd actually be at less than half of the capacity. Presently, we have 6 monitors on each in the morning on all of our bus runs. And so just carrying that over, if we were to move from 8 runs to 5, we would be able to have a monitor easily on each of these runs. So even if there was a difference in age between the front of the bus where elementary students would be seated and the back of the bus where middle high school students would be seated, all on the same run, you would have a driver and a monitor on a bus at half capacity to ensure that everything was copacetic throughout the transportation experience. And ultimately, shifting those runs, more after school runs, allows us to support more extracurricular activities. So this is a lot to bite off. And I hope I'm not overwhelming anyone by bringing this discussion up. But before Dana gets into some logistical considerations about the possibility of actually considering a unified start time, I wonder if I should just take a break and see if anyone has any questions or things they'd like to discuss in greater detail.
I know my household would enjoy the extra time in the morning.
I think it's a great idea, especially for those older students, because like you said, Tim, there's so much research about teenagers that need the extra sleep. And I can't imagine kids getting on the bus at 6:20 in the morning in Wilmington. That's brutal. And I don't know. I think it's a great idea. I don't know how everyone else feels, but I think this has been a long time coming. And if somebody's out there figuring it out like you have, or whoever else is behind the scenes, Nikki Corson, and can make this happen, I think it's amazing.
Thanks, Connie. Any other thoughts before Dana looks at some of the logistics?
No, I think it's a great idea. How much longer do we have? We're going on 2 hours here, and we're about a quarter away through the agenda. So if we can pick it up a little bit, I'd appreciate it.
Dan, can we give a brief overview?
Absolutely.
Everything will flow like water after this, Rick, I assure you.
I will keep it really simple. No, because folks disable participant screen sharing.
I'm not devaluing this whatsoever. I think it's very important. So
It's fine. I don't have to share my screen. Basically, you guys, I actually got this document. It's the enrollment trend.
You can share if you want now, Dan.
It's a little lag. That's actually, before it changes, that is actually an example of a run. So Colleen, you were correct. Nikki, we asked Nikki to basically build the runs and what it would look like. And this is actually a Wilmington run that you see here. And did this for 4 other times. So she took everyone, middle, elementary, all the way up to high school level. And this is just one example. This is the Wilmington 1 run. It would have 38 students on it. It would have a total drive time of 1 hour and 27 minutes. But that includes from the time they leave the bus garage. So that is not student time because the Traverso software system that you're seeing here, that's how they do it. The start time is from the time they leave the bus garage until they get to their final destination.
And the current run's like an hour and 17 or something like
Yeah,
that, right?
so you chop off about 15, 20 minutes depending on road conditions.
Is the blue line the route?
The blue line is the route, yes. So
Why
I
are
mean,
you going to Keene, Upper J?
well, here you'll see that it kind of goes down Route 73. Why it goes on into teen and upper J, I honestly don't know.
I think, doesn't Traversa populate based on geography, the routes?
Yes, I mean, you can create it, 'cause I'll show you, these are all of our runs here.
So Dana, would all the kids, different age levels, they'd be getting on the bus theoretically at the same time versus doing two separate runs? Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
So wouldn't we save a lot on fuel as well?
We believe there will be a savings, right? 'Cause you're
We'd eliminate 3 runs
Right.
automatically.
Yes. The
Okay.
wear and tear on the buses, fuel, and we're not necessarily saving in terms of drivers, anything like that. Once again, Tim has talked about eliminating one position through attrition, but keeping it in the budget just in case we find that this isn't working and we have to add a run. We have it budgeted for that driver for this first year. So that's just kind of a quick look here, and then quickly what is really driving it. For some reason, it will not show you the enrollment. I have it on my screen, but you guys can't see it.
You select.
Oh, you have to you have to share again. You have to go back to your share screen.
Stop share and then reshare again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's an option to share screen and there's an option to share window. So it'll only show like one application at a time.
There we go. This actually, you guys saw this back in 2019. If you remember, there was a report done in terms of enrollment. It goes from 1973 to 2019. Basically, you can see the enrollment has been declining. The peak of it was right about 1998, 2000. And actually 2002, 948 students was the peak, and everything else has gone down. We are currently, I did a snapshot of October of this current year, and it was 553 students. So we've lost about 400 students since 2002. And that really kind of drives home the fact that we're almost half the size that we were 20 years ago.
And still maintaining all the infrastructure, transportation and start time wise of that period.
So it kind of answers the question, how can we fit everyone on 5 runs as opposed to 8 runs? It's because we're running buses of 10 or 12 kids on it in the morning versus 30 kids on it in the morning. I'll leave it at that because, like I said, this is in board docs back in 2019. I can easily share that with you, but that's really at the heart of it logistically.
Any questions, comments? Is that about it, Tim?
That is, yes.
Yep.
Thank you. I think the standardization of times in the 2 schools sort of stands alone. It just that the standards have sort of set a foundation by which we look at it again. So that's all great information. Anybody else have any questions, comments?
Thank you for choosing the later.
I based it on CTE's programming. So.
If not, reports to the board, policy committee report. This is the first read for the dress code. I remind everyone that this is the opportunity to give your input on changes. We'll be voting on this policy I believe the next board meeting. So, Tim, do you want to review any changes? Well, not any changes. There's significant changes.
Sure. So the policy committee did meet, and we took in the recommendations from the ad hoc committee that was formed. And the main pieces really just center around the wearing of hats, having a provision in here which states that students in grades 9 through 12 may wear hats during the pledge, with the exception of the pledge and national anthem, and when a presentation or performance is occurring. And the other meaningful change is has to do with the clause 3. Lower hems of tops should be able to naturally adjust the waistband of bottoms when talking about the length of tops and bottoms in terms of clothing. And those are really the major recommended changes based on all of that work.
What do people think about adding the language about if a teacher opposes hats in their specific classroom, do they have the right to ask the students to remove them?
I personally feel that the teacher should have some input here. And I think someone referenced one of the former teachers that was in our district who asked to have the student remove their hat and there was no problem. I don't remember who it was. It was someone obviously that's been retired, but it seemed to be a common acceptance that that was fine. But that's just my opinion, that I do think that the teachers do have some right in their room to ask them to pull their hat off during their class.
Tim, do you have a comment on that?
Yes, that point was discussed during the committee process, and the sentiment was that having different levels of adherence in different classrooms based on the different feelings of teachers would create an inconsistent experience for students as they went from classroom to classroom, and ultimately could lead to a level of friction that is unintended, and could create discomfort for students, but also discomfort for staff members who may feel that their colleague is doing one thing and they're doing the other, and it could create a perceived sense of favoritism or preferred class rules in one classroom to another.
Anyone else?
I would tend to agree. I think consistency is going to be key here. And the student going room to room.
I am on the policy, and I thought, I've read this a couple of times, and I don't see anything where we've addressed the hoods. So, and I thought we had come up with something.
I agree, Joe. I remember, I think that's just an error of omission. I believe when we got to the subject of headwear, in parentheses, we had talked about at the end of that clause saying this will not include the wearing of hoods. So I do think that does need to be added based on what the policy committee's recommendations were.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely.
Was there anything said about a delay in doing this? Because again, this was brought up at some point because of the students wearing a mask and then a hat on top of it. There was very little of the face that you could actually see. And I remember that there was some concern about that. So is this something that we're implementing at some, immediately, or are we delaying this until we have somewhat more of a normal facial view in our classrooms?
I think the timeline of implementation, based on what the board approves, can really be what it needs to be. I don't think if a change is accepted by the board, that an immediate rollout is going to be prudent anyways, because one of the crucial recommendations through this process was that we need to have a procedure in place which discusses a consistent way that a student or staff member would interact with one another if somebody was going to be dress coded. And so to have that procedure in place first, and then to roll that out as along with the policy change, just to reduce confusion and ensure that everyone is treated respectfully through the process. So I do think that the timing of not just adoption, but implementation is something that can be factored into this decision, Colleen.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other discussion on dress code? If not, there's information for the board, which is inclusive of a NISBA thank you letter for our participation in NISBA and the internal audit claim. Also, Tim has Tim had some narrative in there on the Helping Hands Thrift Shop and the Ecumenical Food Pantry, as well as addressing a discussion that will be held with ORDA. Any elaboration on any of that information?
Not from me, Rick, unless there's questions.
Any questions on this?
Are they looking
Uh,
at building a building or
I think
using the,
I think the notion is to either have one dropped or to stick build depending. Kind of design it for loading and unloading and
If nothing else, Tim, superintendent's report.
all right, thank you, Rick. I will keep it brief, but there are many positive things happening in our facilities and with our students. Just a few shout outs we'd like to give. I don't know if this was seen by the board already, but certainly is discussed in schools, but Caleb Myhill had his 100th episode of the Blue Bomber Weekly come out this week, which is pretty spectacular. Doing anything 100 times is exceptional, and to do something with the level of production and nuance that he does really is deserving of our recognition and praise. So congratulations, Caleb. You are a tremendous asset to the school. It is School Counselors Week this week, so we'd like to thank Connie Haymaker, Lynn Gosling, and Deanna Brown for all of their efforts to support our students. On the ecological footprint side of the house, our composting has resumed at Lake Placid Middle High School after a hiatus due to COVID. The student-driven program is an impressive example of how our district engages students in hands-on learning. So we commend the students for reinitiating that important development. At the elementary school, students in 3rd grade will be traveling to Mount Van Hovenberg, Whiteface, and the ski jumps next week. So looking forward to seeing some great photos of their travails there. Also at the elementary school, there's been a lot of talk of the Olympics. Mrs. Clark has created a bulletin board in the front of the school, and she's charting information with students and providing Olympic facts of the day and rooting on the many residents and athletes who train in and around our community. So we're excited to have the Olympics being embedded in our learning at the elementary school. And Bomber Day is coming up at the elementary school on February 18th. Students will participate in several outdoor activities before being dismissed prior to a half day of professional development. On the athletic side of the house, girls hockey finished up their season with a loss in the semifinals of sections. The 32 rink will be hosting the girls sectional final game, actually hosted the sectional final game yesterday, excuse me. And boys hockey, the Winter Carnival Hockey Tournament did take place this last week. And senior recognition will be taking place on the 18th. Playoffs for hockey will start on February 22nd. For boys basketball, the team has had, unfortunately, a number of interruptions due to COVID, but the games are going to progress with Scroon Lake later on in the week. In girls basketball, the girls team will have their senior recognition game on the 17th, and playoffs will begin on the 23rd. In Nordic and Alpine, sectional races will take place over the next several weeks, with state competitions at Gore Mountain on February 28th and March 1st. And on a final note, the district has partnered with our health insurance consortium. And we are currently planning a wellness day for our staff on March 18th during Superintendent's Day. Staff will be engaging in many activities throughout the day to engage their physical, emotional, and mental wellness after 2.5 years of strain during the wake of the pandemic. And that's all my report.
Excellent, thank you. Linking goals with agenda items. Anybody have anything?
How about students first and foremost with the Winter Carnival and all the activities associated with that?
Very good. Thank you.
I also think you could put in there, and I don't know if it's accurate, but definitely the forethought that's being given to the combining the district start end time. I think that really is putting students first and foremost.
Agree. Not sure where it would go, but it definitely is. Anyone else?
The schools engaging community outreach and involvement. Obviously, that will perennial placement there. I just grabbed that little hanging fruit. Get the easy ones.
Before it turns back.
That's right.
Any other low hanging fruit you want to? I'll get you my list, Karen. I'll send it to you.
Okay. Thank you.
If anybody else has anything, please forward to Karen. Meeting minutes, that's under consent. Personnel, recommended action is approve the following items which are included in the personnel consent agenda. 7B, teaching assistant retirement. 7C, CSEA retirement. 7D, substitute coordinator stipend amendment. And 7E, teaching staff maternity leave request. May I have a motion to accept this consent agenda?
Yes.
Yeah.
Colleen,
Colleen.
who's on your end, Karen?
I had Dan and then Colleen.
Okay. Thank you. Certain we will have a six yes, 0 no.
What happened?
I would like to recognize Peggy Moore. I've had the opportunity in my years on the board to work with Peggy through negotiations and other means, and she's very classy and easy to work with, and she will be missed. And enough can't be said about Lori Baumbach. I'm sure you're not happy about that, Dana, but she's burns the midnight oil and makes coffee in the morning, and she will be missed as well. So
Definitely, absolutely. Need a year to train.
additional action items. The first one is the adult meal price increase. And the recommended action is, whereas the Lake Placid Central School has been charging adult meal prices as follows: breakfast $2.70, lunch at $5. Whereas New York State Education Department on January 14th, 2022 issued a memorandum regarding 2021-22 adult selling prices. Now therefore be it resolved, pursuant to the State Education Department Child Nutrition Program memorandum, adult breakfast prices will be amended to $2.75, and adult lunch prices to be amended to $5.05 effective February 1st, 2021. I have a motion to accept this recommended action.
Well, I wanted to discuss it first. I mean, is this?
We
something-
need
I was
it.
looking at the information-
If we can get a motion first, and then we'll go into discussion.
I'll
Sorry.
move. Second,
Martha
second.
and Colleen. Okay, there you go, Daniel. Go ahead.
All right. So I was looking through the information that was linked there, and I don't see that price listed in any of the mandatory minimums of what we have to charge. So I was just wondering why we were increasing the prices for adults to a level that wasn't listed in that page.
It was $2.71 minimum for breakfast and $5.01 minimum for lunch.
So are we down in the seamless summer option?
Yes.
Okay.
So I rounded to make it even in terms of 275 and 505.
Okay. No, that was my only question. I didn't realize that was applied to
Yes,
everyone.
yeah.
Because it's, it seems a summer issue.
Well, the USDA and New York State, and the USDA, they're the
Sure.
ones selling it. In order for districts to get all meals, not adult meals, but all student meals reimbursed, we had to use the summer option.
I got
the
you. Okay.
seamless summer option. Like last year, we actually had to go with the summer food program to get all of our meals reimbursed for the school year.
Gotcha. Okay. That was my only question is I just wanted to make sure that if at all because I was like, okay, well, that's 10 cents a person if they eat both meals. How many people are we talking? Like, this seems like not the place to pad our budget. So but if it's a minimum issue, then I understand. That's my
And actually, they came out a couple of years ago and basically said that it's from reimbursement before COVID. And they instructed districts to follow a formula and to increase their rates so that reimbursements were not padding the full price of meals on the other side. So that's why we routinely, the board approved an increase because we can't increase it more than 10 cents each year. So we've been doing it 5 cents over the last few years to get up to that threshold that they're telling us. Yes.
all right.
Okay,
Gonna vote?
please vote.
I was in the
6 yes.
child nutrition page.
Okay, 6 yes, 0 no, the motion passes. Resolution is consent, as is special ed. Does anybody have any questions on the February 22nd packet? If not, any good of the cause, any emails or
Nope.
people in
None.
attendance I
Thank you.
can't see?
Nope.
Adjournment phase of the meeting, you have your next meetings listed there. Reminder that we will begin at 5:30 on the 22nd with a budget workshop. Old agenda items. Under new agenda topics, I have put the new positions, and I think we'll bring those up during the budget workshop if Dana and Tim agree. Just reviewing those new positions, the ones especially that are that are being funded by the COVID funding and sustainability of those. There's some discussion there. So if that's the correct place, otherwise during the agenda setting meeting, we can perhaps put them someplace else if need be. Any other new agenda items? Great. Recommended action is to adjourn the meeting at 8:26 p.m. I have a motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Daniel. Second by Colleen.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Bye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much for everybody's endurance. It's a lot of information there. And Tim, thank you very much for all your hard work with the PowerPoints and presentations. It's appreciated.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
My guess